A loose ball, a pile of bodies, and a closed fist landing on the throat of the most famous player in the sport. No foul was called in the moment, and that silence is exactly what turned one basketball play into a week-long national argument. Here's what actually happened. On the 24th of June, at Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, the Indiana Fever hosted the Phoenix Mercury. And this was not a fresh matchup. These two teams had already faced each other on Monday night, just 2 days earlier, and that game had been a war. 6 technical fouls were called. 1 player was ejected. CLARCK herself picked up her 5th technical of the season, one her team later tried and failed to get overturned. So when they lined up again on Wednesday, everybody in the building knew the temperature was already high. Phoenix ended up winning by a final score of 111 to 109, 2 points. But the score is not what people are still arguing about a full week later. The moment that lit the fuse came midway through the second quarter, with the ball loose on the floor and players diving to grab it. Clark was down on the ground reaching for it. Alyssa Thomas fell into the pile, and as she pushed herself back up, her fist made contact with Clark's throat. And then, nothing. Play continued like it never happened. No one on the court reacted. No one on either bench seemed to notice. And that should have been the end of it, except somebody hit the replay button. Once the slow-motion clip started circulating online, the reaction was instant and enormous. Freeze the frame at the exact right moment, and it looks vicious. Within hours, it was on every timeline, and the outrage was overwhelming. So the league did something it almost never does. The very next day, the WNBA went back, reviewed a play that no official had flagged during the game, and retroactively handed Thomas a flagrant foul penalty too, a 1-game suspension, and a fine. Now here is the detail that keeps this whole thing burning. Clark did leave that game early, but she did not leave because of the throat contact. She exited in the third quarter with a back problem, an issue she has dealt with for a long time. She had already scored 19 points and handed out 8 assists in just 20 minutes before she went to the bench. And her back was not new. She was limited to only 13 games the previous season because of lower body problems, and she had already missed a game earlier that same year for the same reason. In fact, she appeared to tweak that back on a completely separate play when she was fouled shooting a three-pointer and fell to the floor. So 2 different moments got blended together in the public imagination into one story. And that blending is a big part of why the argument split so cleanly down the middle. Was this a dangerous, deliberate shot at a defenseless star? Or was it an ugly-looking accident in a scramble that a freeze frame made 10 times worse? Here's where it gets even more interesting. The coach who reacted most furiously was Fever coach Stephanie White. And White is not some outsider throwing stones. She actually coached Thomas for 2 full seasons back when she ran the Connecticut Sun. She knows exactly who Thomas is as a player. And she still tore into the play, calling it dangerous and unacceptable, and pointing out that it was the second night in a row that things had boiled over. But White reserved a lot of her anger for the officials, not just for Thomas. Her argument was simple and pointed. The referees, she said, were so locked onto the ball that nobody was watching what was happening to the players on the ground. And when you have bodies piled on the floor, that is exactly when the dangerous stuff happens. Being surprised the play occurred was one thing. Being stunned that 4 officials somehow missed it live was another. And it did not stay a basketball story for long. The Attorney General of the state of Indiana weighed in publicly, blasting a single-game suspension as far too soft for what he described as an assault on the court. The Fever front office put out its own statement, with the team president saying player safety has to come first. Meanwhile, former players now working in the media pushed back hard the other way. One well-known analyst argued that the league had reacted to the optics of a viral image rather than the reality of the play, and that going back to turn a no call into a suspension was almost unheard of. So even the punishment itself became its own debate. And it is worth knowing this was not the first time the league had reached back to upgrade a foul in a game involving Clark. The season before, a technical foul against a different opponent was later bumped all the way up to a flagrant 2. For some, that showed the league protecting its biggest star. For others, it looked like the WNBA reacting to public pressure instead of what the referees actually saw. So far, this looks like a very familiar story. Star gets hit, league underreacts, fans erupt. But this is where it flips completely. Because a few days later, Thomas served her suspension sitting out a road game, and then she spoke to reporters for the first time. And she did not apologize. She called the play a complete accident and insisted she did not even realize it had happened until after the final buzzer. She pointed out that if you watch the clip, nobody in the stands and nobody on the bench reacted in the moment either. In her mind, this was simply physical basketball being frozen and twisted into something it was not. And then she dropped the part almost nobody saw coming. Thomas said that she and her teammates had been buried under death threats and racial slurs since the incident. Not ordinary online trolling which every athlete deals with, but genuine threats against their lives and even their families. She said the hatred had gone far beyond anything she had experienced in her entire career. Then she turned her fire on the person at the very top of the sport. Thomas publicly called out the league commissioner, accusing her of staying silent while players had their safety threatened. She said she found out about her own suspension only about 10 minutes before it hit social media, and that leadership had done nothing to protect them since. But even that has a counter twist. Because the league did respond, putting out a statement condemning the hate and insisting player safety is the top priority. And according to multiple reports, the commissioner and Thomas had actually exchanged text messages, with the commissioner offering a phone call. So even the claim of total silence is contested, which is exactly why this story refuses to settle. Now, to really understand why this one exploded, you have to understand the history sitting underneath it. Because for a lot of fans, this was not an isolated moment. It fit a pattern. Thomas is one of the most physical players in the league, and that physicality has landed her in the middle of several high-profile incidents over the years. She was hit with a flagrant 2 in 2024 for slamming Angel Reese to the ground. During the 2025 playoffs, a collision with Thomas was involved in a serious ankle injury to another star, Napheesa Collier, a moment that had that team's coach screaming at the officials. To a section of the fan base, all of that adds up to a reputation. But that framing is exactly what Thomas rejects. This is a 6-time All-Star deep into her 13th season, one of the most accomplished players of her era. And her whole game, her entire value, is built on being tough and physical. She argues the conversation has spiraled far beyond a basketball play, and that being aggressive in the paint is not the same as being dirty. She even pointed out that she went through a smaller version of the same online wave back in the 2024 playoffs when she faced CLARCK and the Fever with a different team. It happened then too, she said, just never on this scale. And that word scale is really the heart of the whole thing, because none of this is really about one fist and one throat. CLARCK has arrived as the single biggest draw women's basketball has ever seen, and she brought millions of brand new fans with her. But that same tidal wave of attention dragged something darker in behind it. Since her rookie year, CLARCK has absorbed a long series of hard, controversial hits, and almost every one of them has spun off into a viral firestorm loaded with arguments about race, politics, and officiating. Back in the 2024 playoffs, she took a finger to the eye that left her with a visible black eye and struggled to shoot for the rest of a series her team lost in a sweep. That moment went viral in exactly the same way, with fans freezing the footage and dissecting every angle. This latest incident is just the newest chapter in that same ongoing story. And even CLARCK's own coach admitted the ugliest part out loud. She said most of the venom is not coming from real basketball fans at all. It is coming from people who are using the league, using its players, and using these moments to push their own divisive agendas. The players on both sides are getting caught in the middle of a fight that stopped being about basketball a long time ago. So was it a dirty play or a basketball accident that a slow motion replay turned into a national crisis?